Hi, I'm going to be giving a quick tutorial on the tape measure tool, within Trimble SketchUp. A word about version. I am showing you using Trimble SketchUp Make 2014, also known as version 14. But what I'm saying should be equally applicable to Trimble SketchUp 8 and even the old Google SketchUp 7. So this is a pretty universal tool. I also want to point out something about the recording software that I use. My cursor there is large. I do not see that. That is added in my software after I post-process the video, during that post-processing, so that you can see it a little bit better. And additionally, when you see these rings coming off, that's me clicking, because you can't hear the mouse click very well through the recording software, so that just lets you know where and when I am clicking. Okay, so a little bit about the tape measure tool. It looks like this. Alright, little tape measure. The default shortcut key for it is T for tape measure. I suggest you get very used to using the shortcuts. It is the way to go within SketchUp. And the cursor turns into this tape measure. You'll notice that at the bottom right hand corner there's a little plus sign. Like other tools within SketchUp, that plus sign indicates that you're creating something new. The push-pull tool can use it, the copy-move tool, for instance, and with all of them, the control key, by tapping the control key and letting go, you turn that cursor on and off. So I'm going to talk about 4 uses of the tape measure tool, and the first one is in the mode with it off. So let's keep it off. That mode, that use of the tape measure tool is a very simple one. It's to measure things, just like you would expect. So I take my tape measure tool and I click on an endpoint or a point somewhere, and I click again. And in the bottom right hand corner, this little text box that says that is approximately 79 inches long. And if I measure some other line segment, you'll notice that I haven't clicked yet, but I have that little tool tip that tells me the distance. When I hover over a new point, it goes away after a couple seconds, but once I click a second time, in that box is inserted the length of the piece that I've just measured. Okay, that's the simplest version of the tape measure tool. Now the next 2 uses are creating guides, guide points and guide lines, and I'm going to create both, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the difference between them and how you get them. So here I do have that little plus sign, so I'm creating guides. I'm going to create a guide point, or I could create a guide line. Now you'll notice that the line is infinite in both directions. Alright, goes on forever. The guide point does not. Guide line, infinite in both directions. Guide point, or if you'd like to think of it as a guide segment, that is this segment here, with a guide point on the end of it, you certainly can do that. Okay, so these are guide points and guidelines. I am very quickly going to delete all the guides on the page because it'll clutter up quickly, so I'll do that quite a bit. Alright, so if I would like to create a guide point, then I must start from something that is a point. So here I have the end point of this edge, this edge, and this edge. Alright, and I can just click on it once, I move somewhere else, click on it a second time, and it drops a guide point. If instead of clicking on a point, I click on an edge, then when I move the cursor, I drag out a guide line. So an edge turns into a line, a point turns into a point, with, unfortunately, some certain exceptions. Watch. Let me delete these guides. Sometimes SketchUp will try to think for you, and you can be happy or sad about that. I find it annoying in many cases, but for instance, if I go from this end point to this end point, it constructs a line. It does not construct a segment. If I start at this endpoint and I move to this endpoint, again, it creates a segment. I'm sorry, it creates a line rather than a segment. If I go from this endpoint to this endpoint, it does nothing. All right? And what's going on here is that this point and this point don't share a single edge. If I'm moving from this endpoint to this endpoint, they do share an edge. Usually, when you go from a point to a point, Google will either do nothing if they share an edge, or if you go from a point to a point that doesn't have share an edge, it'll create a line. So it's not exactly fitting the bill where if you move from a point, it will automatically create a guide point. Here it's creating a guide line. So when you connect up unconnected edges, you actually end up creating lines rather than segments. Now let me delete these for a moment. Okay, now a couple more things about this. What qualifies as a point? Well, I'm going to hit L for line. I'm going to create a little line on my surface. Back to T for tape measure. If I start at the end point of this line, I'm going to get a guide point. Alright. If I drag out an edge here, I have an intersection here. An intersection is a point. If I start on a guide line, that's not a point, that's a line, so I can drag out an edge. But if the 2 points share an edge, then in fact I don't create a new line. So actually, it seems like I can't create a guideline which goes through this edge. Yes, I can. And the simple way to do that is to click on an edge, move away from it, then move right back to it, and click again. That will create a guideline which is 0 inches away from the original, that is to say, the same line. Okay, deleting my guides again. I'm going to delete this line. Okay, and actually I should say something about that first. So T for tape measure. If I want have some of these things around, I have different ways of getting rid of them. I can select them in some way. Alright, they're selectable just like anything else. And I can right click and hit erase, or I can hit the delete key. I can come up here with the eraser and I can move over them. Alright, so these are different ways we can delete our guides. And also we have a delete guide command. Alright, I have a shortcut for it, which I use quite often. Okay, finally, the last thing that you can do with the tape measure tool is you can resize your model in order to make certain things true. So for instance, I have measured this thing a couple times, T for tape measure. I've measured this, and we see this is about 49 inches, alright? But what say, okay, I've clicked there, I'm going to click there. It tells me it's 49 inches. I say, oh no you aren't. You are actually 30 inches. So I type 30, and when I hit enter, it asks me if I want to resize the model. If I then say yes, it changes the entire world such that this is 30 inches. Alright? So, if you recall, here, let me undo. This was 30, this was 20. If I made this 30 inches, resize the model, now those have updated. Those have become smaller. And they've all scaled proportionally. Let's see, undo that. Finally, I don't think I've mentioned this yet. If I am dragging something out a certain direction, here I have a line, I'm moving along a face. Now I'm just constructing a new line. I'm not measuring something. I'm not going from along an edge. I'm just moving out to where there doesn't exist anything else at all. Okay? If that says it's 27 and 9/64, if I instead type 30, enter, it actually puts it at 30. So this is very much like the line tool or the move tool. I can start moving and I can say, oh, you want that to be 15. Hit enter, enters my second click, and voila, I've constructed a distance which is 15 exactly. The rescaling is not queued up unless you're measuring something that is a fixed distance. Alright, so if I'm measuring from one point to another point, alright, it's not that I'm constructing a new line, I'm saying this point to this point, which was 50 something inches. If I say no, you're not 50 inches, you are 80 inches, enter. Do I want to resize the model? Sure. Okay, so that's the tape measure tool. It's very powerful. Use it.